If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos. Was this game really this hard? Oh, come in!
Hello, Missy.
Oh, hey AJ. Is there something you need?
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you if you've seen the latest MLP episode.
Well, if by saw you mean cheated because I saw the early leaks, then yeah, that's kinda what I did. Couldn't help myself.
Me either. Worked well when it was the perfect pair for the Season 7 hiatus. Anyways, I think the episode discussed a certain topic I related to, and was looking for someone to collab with me on it. It'd be a more interesting way to express the thoughts on the episode, since I recall through your confessions and personal vlogs that you had a similar setup as a kid. Plus, I really wanted an excuse to do something with you since forever.
I suppose that wouldn't hurt, but let's try to not make it too complicated because I'm currently working on reviewing The Last Jedi.
Is that why you're playing video games in your free time instead?
Not bad. Well, let's get to it. This is Surf and Turf. Well, I might as well forget about any possibility of the Tree of Harmony being this mysterious being of nature, since everything about it has just been generalized to this map that kinda works however it wants now. Anyway, the CMC are given their first friendship mission, as they travel to Mount Eris to help Silverstream's brother Terramar decide whether he wants to live on the surface or in the sea. This is because some of the hippogriffs decided to stay as sea ponies after the Storm King was defeated, so they split up the magic pearl in different pieces to keep their ability to transform. It seems like an interesting concept, and admittedly I'm one of those people who cheated by seeing the episode early. But after seeing it, I think it's a pretty good episode. It's practically on par with the previous one.
See my How I Would've Wrote It Better series. But anyways, with Season 8 so far being so bland, how could it possibly salvage itself? With another brilliant CMC episode that somehow tackles a rather difficult topic for kids without, you know, talking about it because... Hasbro.
My first big question though revolves around the idea that Princess Skystar has cousins. Okay, so if she had someone to talk to this whole time, why was she acting so lonely in the movie? She never bothered to talk to her cousins or do something with them? There's no given reason why. It's not a negative against this episode specifically, but with this in mind, the movie ends up making less sense in context.
Shame too. I mean, with how great the song was with Shanette and Christian Chenoweth, do you know how epic it could have been if she got to sing with the CMC? But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
One good quality I'd like to point out is how the references to the movie are much better here than they were in School Days. It's a reasonable method to keep the audience informed in case they didn't see it, and they actually relate to the story that the episode is telling. It's a small backstory told through Apple Bloom's perspective, who adds a fun twist to it to make it more interesting to her. Instead of just saying this was something that happened in between seasons, it's used in the episode's favor to give it some background. There's also the idea of the pearl being split into pieces for those who want to travel between kingdoms, which is something that can make sense considering that the Crystal Heart has been split into pieces too. I like how it's kept as a background element, but is also being used as a key figure in the story. This was something that was actually hinted at in School Days, so it helps to keep it from being something that just comes out of nowhere.
Speaking of, while it's a nice touch and somewhat helps with the plot, 1. Why would Nova just break up a powerful magical artifact like the Pearl? I mean, okay, even if you want to say she's trying to be a good queen and make up for not helping with the Storm King, you're still gonna run out of magical fragments sometimes. What then? But a rather small nitpick overall.
The episode also has really good pacing. Within the first few moments, everything you need to know is made clear. The CMC have to go to Mount Eris to solve a problem, they're introduced to Terramar and are given a tour of the village, we learn about how the hippogriffs have been rebuilding their culture, and Terra expresses his happiness in being in both places while explaining his frustration over being torn between worlds. None of the information is rushed, and the rest of the episode puts forth a good effort to showing how the CMC tackle this issue with their problem-solving skills.
Plus, Twilight's the most adorable in a good way we've seen in a while, using a permission slip she could have just mailed as an excuse to learn more about hippogriff culture. Seriously, when's the last time we've seen Twilight like this that wasn't grating?
I do think that Twilight's adorkable attitude fits the situation pretty well. She's seeing the rebirth of an entire culture and all of the new additions that come with it. And because she's known for her field and studies, her excitement is understandable. Her delivery is good, and she remains level-headed without getting carried away. I also think that her reason for going to Mount Eris at all is a pretty sound way to keep the school relevant to the overall plot, by having Silverstream's form signed for a field trip.
So after they get to Mount Eris, where we meet Terra, who's going through a bit of a crisis. As Twilight runs off to a more or less party with the hippogriffs, we learn Terra's mother and father don't live in the same house. Whereas Dad returned to the mountain, she returned to the sea. As such, this causes Terra to feel like he needs to choose which parent he'd rather live with, and if you haven't guessed or thought of it by now, this episode is, possibly, trying to subtly address kids who are dealing with divorce or split up parents. I mean, think about it. We have a kid with parents who no longer live with each other because they have different lifestyle choices, causing said kid to move around from one home to another, even having to choose which home parent he loves more, and feels uncertain because of it. There are a few differences and things we'll get to later that counter this, but I instantly recognize this as I too was in a divorced family as a kid, often with both my parents, very unintentionally, trying to make me like them more than the other, but still, it made me feel rather like how Terra was in this entire episode. Would you agree you see this connection yourself, Miss, since I know you were in the same boat?
Well, not exactly. While I can see hints and similarities to a divorced family, I don't think it's where the episode is speaking from. From what we see, there's no indication that Terra's parents split up because of conflict in the marriage. They simply just prefer different lifestyles. When they meet on the beach, they seem pretty happy to see each other, and at the end of the episode, they work together to help Terra with his issue. But while I can't see the episode as an allegation for divorce, I must admit that the dilemma that Terra faces is a very fascinating one. He feels split not just by his family, but by his true calling in life. Does he want to be a hippogriff or a sea pony? Both paths are something that he shares a passion for, and because everyone else has made a decision, he feels pressured into making one himself. He doesn't want to feel left behind, but he also doesn't want to choose because it means that he'll have to give something up in the process. We can probably assume that Terra is a teenager, and his dilemma can be similar to teenagers in high school, trying to decide what to do with their lives. All of his friends have made their decision, but he hasn't been able to, leaving him frustrated and unsure of himself.
Not helping is Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle. And don't tell me you can't see more of this parallel as they end up fighting over which world is better. Sweetie for the turf, Scootaloo for the surf, as well as shipping fuel for Scootalbell fans. While both were fun, I kind of like seeing Scootaloo and Sequestria a bit more. I mean, just that bit about swimming being like flying warmed my heart. Of course, I kind of scratched my head on why Sweetie Belle didn't like the sea at all since sound and music travel better underwater. Oh, and the whole shooby-dooby-doopy under the sea. But it worked as, after a song far better than Friendship Always Wins, the two end up breaking up, even with a broken heart split on their decision with Apple Bloom having to be the tiebreaker.
A minor problem that I have with Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo in this episode is that the way they argue and break up feels kind of rushed and out of character. Both of them are being too self-absorbed, completely forgetting about Terra's situation. And aside from that, there's a couple of times where Scootaloo's mood swing feels really off. She seemed happy to be in Harmonizing Heights, but all of a sudden during the song, she just looks annoyed. In Sweetie Belle's case, the episode put time into showing her disinterest in Sequestria, helping make the conclusion that she came to feel understandable. With Scootaloo, there's no given reason as to why she wouldn't want Terra to be on the land. I do like that her time in the water gave her an experience as to what flying feels like, something that she's been longing to understand as a disabled Pegasus. But aside from that, Sweetie and Scooty end up coming across as too juvenile. It breaks the idea of Sweetie Belle being the most mature of the group and Scootaloo being the most confident.
Again, isn't that what happens when parents who are getting a divorce do when they're breaking up? Often forgetting about the feelings of their kids with selfish ambitions, even acting more like kids than their actual kids? Again, personal experience. What doesn't help, but makes this parallel more obvious, is Apple Bloom having to be the final vote and also caught in the middle of things. Now normally Apple Bloom is the weaker of the CMC, but here she plays the middleman rather well. She's not swayed by either side and can calmly and rationally look at the situation from both angles.
I suppose Sweetie and Scooty could be feeling the shoes of the arguing parents. But again, their arguing just feels too selfish and juvenile for them to be seen as parental figures. So it ends up coming across as off-putting instead of being a metaphor. I do agree that Apple Bloom is portrayed very well, acting as much more reasonable and level-headed. She sees the turmoil that Tara is going through and wants to help him make a healthy decision. She also does a really good job working off the immaturity of the other two. When Twilight asks about what went wrong, she doesn't say anything. She just gives them a straight look about their mistake and allows them to confess to the error of their ways. She's helping them to fix a situation they made more complicated and take responsibility for their actions. One thing I should mention is the idea of returning to Mount Eris on a lower budget. Yeah, seeing the atmosphere and the quality between the movie and the episode back to back can be very distracting. The movie was our first time seeing this place and it just looked so gorgeous. But now it looks like we're kind of just looking at the table scraps of the movie, with all of the impressive lighting effects and three-dimensional angles gone. But I suppose that's not really a fair comparison to make since we always knew that the TV show ran on a particular budget. The real subject of discussion is the design of their houses, their villages, and how the hippogriffs who stay underwater adjust to a new life. I really like the idea of living in these little huts built in trees that are reasonably close to the ground. The concept plays off the fact that they're part bird and part pony, so they feel connected to both the air and the ground. And it also takes time to show how the seagriffs adjust to living different lives underwater, making up a new culture with new activities and particular house structures. But there's still a couple of things in the episode that feel really off. First, when did they have time to build a train station at Mount Eris? And not just a train station, but a train road connecting it to Ponyville. Really think about that. They were in the middle of a body of water separated from land, but now all of a sudden there's a path of land connecting Mount Eris to the forest next to it? And you also have to consider the time that went into making train tracks connecting Mount Eris to Equestria. They literally had to build train tracks leading from Equestria through the desert, through Capper's town, through all of the area covered by the pirate ship, and they still have to cut down all of the trees in the forest and reshape the earth in that area. I know it has nothing to do with the episode, but from a world-building perspective, it's very distracting.
You mean like how Pinkie Pie travels Equestria in one day and party pooped? Plus, it never said how much time passed, and this was said to be the first train trip to the newly built station.
And while on the topic of world building, how does Queen Nova watch over her kingdom if it's split in two? Did she split her military in two? Does she have a husband covering one area while she covers another? You'd think that while Twilight was there for research, she would have taken the time to go to Queen Nova and ask her that question. But the biggest problem of all ultimately lies in how Apple Bloom claims how it's a problem that only they can solve. Because apparently, the map thinks they can only solve it too. But here's my question. Why is this a problem that only the CMC can solve? So none of the main six, or Starlight or Sunburst, could have worked on this problem? It seemed like a relatable dilemma that any of them would have understood. If it's to teach the CMC something, what did they learn? They don't exactly learn anything new that they didn't already know from a previous episode, so it ultimately feels like them going to solve the problem was a random choice by the map, instead of choosing based on who was most qualified for it.
Well, my best guesses would be 1. The CMC are more Tara's age, so they could relate more. 2. The map could have seen 3 pony friends would be the best choice, knowing Tara's conflict, and that 2 would lean different ways, and one would have to be the non-judgmental voice of reason. And 3. We needed a CMC episode this season, and they haven't been called by the map yet, so win-win! Anyway, despite the sea ponies and hippogriffs differences, they're still able to live in harmony, as we see them both gathering at the beach. Which gives Apple Bloom her idea, as we see Tara in a tree, replaced with kids hiding away from his parents in a treehouse or so, as they realize there never was a conflict. There was no reason Tara had to choose, as even his parents reassure him of this. Unfortunately, this does kind of undermine the whole divorce parallel, since, let's be honest, when are divorces ever this happy or easily resolved? But I don't think that's what the episode was going for if that was the intention. Rather, I think it was more going for a everything will be alright moral. It's more to show kids who are going through a split up family that they don't need to feel conflicted or think it's their fault for any reason, or they have to make some impossible choice. They can still love both their parents and their different lifestyles without feeling like they need to love one over the other.
I do think the ending is pretty good, but that mostly comes from how well it plays off the episode's themes. Taro was having a hard time deciding what to do with his life, and part of that was because his parents lived in different areas. You could make the argument that he had a hard time choosing because he didn't want to give up one of his parents. He felt like he was in a situation where he had to choose between families, which can be a lot more stressful than deciding a career. But his parents are there to tell him that he doesn't have to choose between families, because as long as he spends time with them as frequently as possible, he can still have a relationship with them. They'll continue to support him no matter what choice he makes. And to help him make his decision, the CMC wrap up their chart with both places having one common strength: Tara getting to spend time with people who care about him, so no matter where he goes, he'll always feel at home. Overall, this episode was a very nice experience. Aside from some questionable world building and confusion over why only the CMC would be appropriate for this mission, it serves as a really nice allegory for things like midlife crisis, choosing what you want to do with your life, where you want to live, maintaining a relationship with your family, and discovering your passions. It may not be as memorable as a lot of other episodes, but it still makes for a very fun experience, with a callback to the movies that actually ties things together.
Apart from maybe being more clear of its potential moral, but living with "this is Hasbro," the episode, if it was also a real intention, found a clever way to tackle the topic of kids with divorced or split up parents, and found a way to make it both entertaining and relatable. We also had some cool world building, fun moments with characters who had otherwise been annoying up till now, and even a satisfying, optimistic ending. I swear, if we have more episodes like this for Season 8, the show might still be salvageable yet, with or without the divorce parallels. Well, I was still able to appreciate the episode talking about it, even if it couldn't because, Hasbro, like how they did Death with Tanks in the Memories, because, say Missy, why do we like this show again?
Because it's a lot better than it has any right to be.
I see. Plus the fanfiction to come out of it is even better than most. So wanna order some Jasper pizza pie?
Would I?